The recording started, Pawan. So you can see me, correct, Pawan? Screen is clear.
Nice and clear, Velu.
Okay, great.
Sharp as always.
So there is no issue between. Okay, no issue. All right. So it's at 3 p.m. Let's get started. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining Salesforce CRM Center of Excellence. It is hosted by CRM COE. I'm Velu Palani. I am the chief moderator for CRM COE, and I work for Blue Cross Blue Shield, or HCSC Corporation, as a senior director, managing the Salesforce platform, and also COE lead. And we have excellent speaker today, Pawan Reddyvari, and I would like Pawan to introduce himself. Pawan, can you please
Thanks,
go ahead?
Velu. Yeah, thanks, Velu. My name is Pavan Reddy Vari, part of Persistent Systems. Persistent Systems is a platinum Salesforce partner. Been in the ecosystem for more than 10 years. Really looking forward to this discussion, Velu. And I really must appreciate you for this initiative and doing this for the Salesforce HANA or Salesforce COE is, I think, one of the most elusive topics, I would say. Things which are really needed, but a lot of people get it right, get it wrong. So I think I really appreciate you taking this time and putting this thought program and setting this session up.
Thank
Really
you,
looking
Pawan.
forward to this stuff.
Appreciate joining. So I wanted to give you a quick heads up on the housekeeping. So that we have about 9 slides. So we have less number of slides. There is going to be a lot of discussion. So between Pawan and myself, we are going to share the information. The objective here is to share our knowledge. We are not promoting anybody, any vendor. What do we know about Salesforce as a COE? How do you build it? Why do you need a COE? What are the challenges? And what are the typical models out there that you can take it as a guideline and start using it for yourself? And then we will also talk about how do you manage your relationship, and how do you, what are the steps involved in implementing Salesforce CRM or any CRM COE. So having said that, I would like to get started with,
Yeah.
Pawan, do you have anything before?
I was just trying to talk about value. I think we'll keep this as conversational as possible. And I'm sure, given the topic, that we have a bunch of questions. So I want to check with you. Do you want the participants to ask the questions on the web channel, or we should wait till the end, the last
Good,
10 minutes for the
good
question?
point. Thank you for bringing that. So please, if you have questions, put it on your chat window. This is a regular WebEx. Put it on the chat window. We will answer the question at the end, and we will have about 5 to 10 minutes at the end. We will certainly answer. So I think this will help us to share our thoughts and take your question and answer. So Pawan, is that okay with you?
Yeah, and I'm sure, given if there's anything which we don't get answered, they can definitely reach out to you or me for any of those questions.
Absolutely, absolutely. All right, thank you. Okay, let's move on to the big question. Why do we need CRM COE? If you have any type of CRM, you should have COE, and it's why. So typically, whenever you have a CRM system, you work with the business and you work with an IT, and you need to make sure that you have a good alignment. And yeah, the next one, if you work for a company which has got a lot of regulations, you need to make sure that the policies are in place so people are not taking your data or metadata accidentally or intentionally. The third one is, as you have CRM systems, CRM is no longer a new buzzword. This has been there for 20 years or maybe 50 years. But the process, you need to make sure that the processes that you have are effective and more efficient. So that is one of the reasons why you should have a COE and increase architecture and platform capability. If you have, the companies keep growing, and if you have today, let's say 4,000 users, and you're planning something for 4,000 users, 5 million customers, so tomorrow your company grows into a next two folds, you need to make sure that your architecture is scalable. And that is where the COE can help. And then create governance and protect data and metadata. It is whether you have one org or you have multiple orgs. Some companies, I work with orgs, companies with more than 10 orgs, and there are people whom I know, they have one org all the way to 50 orgs. I heard some of the Silicon Valley large companies have even up to 200 orgs. So when you have that, you need to make sure that you're protecting the data. For some company, metadata itself is a confidential information, so you need to make sure that you're protecting it. And then you need to be the trusted advisor. So you become a trusted advisor for IT and business. And ultimately, you have a CRM system, you have a lot of insights. If you don't drive the innovation, then it becomes very difficult for companies to succeed. Finally, at the end of the day, if you do not help the business realize the value, how good is it? So is this COE is the right platform? Is it the COE is the right player to make this happen? I would say yes. It all depends on how well you design your CRM COE, and you can make use of the CRM COE to benefit these things. So, Pawan, you have anything to add to this here? Pawan, you're on mute.
Now, I think I truly agree, Velu. I think given the Salesforce ecosystem and the Salesforce platform, some of these are very, very critical for the success of it, right? Because as as the saying goes, with great power comes great responsibility. The platform is kind of now really, really powerful, right? So you want to make sure that you do things right so that the end value is really projected well. So in that context, Venu, I think given that you've been doing this for quite some time with multiple organizations as well, what do you really think is the role of the CEO, right? In the sense of in the entire life cycle of the development life cycle as well as the entire product life cycle and solutions life cycle of the Salesforce ecosystem. Where do you see it fit? And in the sense of from a program perspective, as well as in the organizations, how are you seeing that fit in well, right, in terms of uh, IT, business, and stuff like that? I'd love to hear your perspective and see what your experience has been on this.
It's a great question, Pawan. I have seen multiple. Actually, it's a kind of a binary. It's not multiple organizations deal with it differently, but when it comes to where does COE sit in? Do they sit in business side or the technology side? So I've seen in both places. So there are pros and cons between where do you position the COE. I don't think there is one straight answer. It could be in business or in technology. And there, we can talk further in terms of the pros and cons of having in one place versus the other place. Maybe that's a different topic that we should do it. But generally, I don't know the percentage of companies where COE sits in the business versus technology. Maybe we should do some research on that and find out how many companies have COE sit in the business and how many of them sit in the technology side.
No, I agree. We've had the same experience while we've been working with multiple customers. I think it's based on the maturity of the organization, based on the maturity of the platform, of the business unit. There, it kind of sits in both of them, and there are lots of because ultimately it's the ROI and who pays for it, right? And that becomes a big question. But in sense of from a life cycle perspective of like where does the COE get involved is also an interesting question because I think that philosophy a lot of people feel, whether they should be involved in the entire life cycle or only governance. But I'd love to hear what your perspective is. Where do you think the CEO should be involved anytime there's something happening with ecosystem?
That's a great question, Pavan. I worked in the consulting for many years. I've been working with the ecosystem for about 20 years. I think the more and more I think of it, COE, it's they don't, if you look at this slide, COE sits in, they span across all the life cycle of the project, whether it is a pre-delivery, delivery, or post-delivery. They span across the facets of the project's life cycle. So you can call it pre-delivery as a planning or strategy. Delivery, we all know that whether it's a new project or an existing implementation where you're making an enhancement, and then once the project is complete, you still need to support. So the COE supports all three phases of a project or a product. Some companies are using product-based approach in agile methodology, where products seem to be more predominant compared to projects. So the COE sits across. They help enable, or they enable each phase of the project in a systematic manner. But ultimately, the end of the day, we all support the business users. If you're the technology team which delivers the post-delivery and the pre-delivery, they all support the business users. But who are the beneficiaries here? The beneficiaries are end customers. So if you have a strong COE, the customer should be able to see the customer service. And then we also have to be able to see if your bottom line, the top line revenue, bottom line savings, and the profit, so on and so forth. So that is the idea behind having the COE, Pavan. And maybe I want to hear from you, Pavan. You are as a CRM, as a SI partner, Salesforce Platinum partner. What is your experience of working with Salesforce COE with your customers?
Um, so that's right, Venu. So actually, maybe let me pivot it a little bit and say, I'll tell you what challenges I've seen when COE doesn't exist or the COE is
Yeah,
not powerful
good.
enough to implement something, right? And as you correctly pointed out, it's on all the three facets, whether it's pre-delivery, delivery, or post-delivery.
Mhm.
It has a major impact in the sense. So let me like simple things. I've seen customers
Mhm.
where if the business unit is really small or the number of users small, they have like 60 or 70 or 80 orgs, right? Like it's just unbelievable. Like just fathoms me the number of orgs people just start having. So that anytime a new business problem comes up, they want to create a new org. So just the governance on when to create an org, when to reuse stuff inside the org itself is a big, I think, big ROI and a big governance issue, right? And I think so. Just from that aspect, from
Mhm.
a delivery perspective, like it's so important because as I said, platform now has evolved so much. There's so many new things which happen. It keeps changing. The great thing about Salesforce is that you get releases every 4 months, right? And every time there's new functionalities and you can develop things very easily. So the fact that you need to have certain guidelines and standards, like the best practices across your org, those are so important for you to get the true value of the platform because it's the idea here is that you should quickly do things and quickly derive value. Right? Technology should enable you. So unless you follow those guidelines, unless you follow the best practices, you really don't get the true value of the platform. So the unless I've seen a lot of organizations where even while they have the CV, unless they have that governance in place, a reusability of components, right? It becomes a big question mark. And then last but not least is the post-delivery facet you're talking about it's it's amazing how everyone wants to do something, right? Because now it's the world of citizen developers. People want to build their own like app exchange products. So, like I'll give you a good example. I know organizations where it's the same uh, in e-signature concept, right? Like you can go with EchoSign or you can go with Adobe or you can Adobe EchoSign or you can DocuSign. One business unit starts saying that I want DocuSign. They sign the contract, they do all this. 2 days later, another business unit say, I don't like what's there. I have a better relationship with EchoSign. I want to do that. So it's just simple things like that. Like, managing what app exchange products to go with or what exchange product not to go with. What should be our backup and recovery strategy. Those kind of things become so critical that it's important for someone to play that role. And if no one's doing it, it just gets lost in translation. So
It's,
at least that's why I feel that's become very important for people to do that.
so what I'm hearing from you, Pavan, if COE does not exist, whatever can go wrong will go wrong. Is that a fair statement?
That's correct, right? Like it's somebody has to do this, right? Like it's not it's an enterprise wide platform. So you need to have these checks and balances and best practices in place. And if you don't do that, then it's what goes wrong will go wrong at some point.
I agree with you on that, Pavan, because especially when you have multiple Salesforce instances and you have a multiple stakeholders that they want to meet their objectives and they have their priorities. I think this is where competing priorities will mess things up. In my experience and professional experience, 20 years of dealing with Salesforce, I have rebuilt 3 times Salesforce. One customer that I worked with, they could not even use the data. They said, forget, it's a small company, not a large organization, very small, less than 50 people in the company. They said, okay, we will give you a new set of data that you please go ahead and build it because this is so convoluted, complex. People can mess things up because this is a highly configurable platform. People configure without realizing the long-term impact. So I think the COE can play a major role. Thank you, Pavan. In terms of one question, Pavan, on this further on the business users or the end customers, how apparent for the end customers to say that I'm seeing the benefit of COE, or it should be not end customers. I'm talking about the business users. How apparent it should be. Should we work with the end users, give a lot of education and communication, or it is mainly the delivery teams that where the COE um, uh, uh, communicates?
No, so at least where I've seen both working in the enterprises. I think some places where as you said, it's as Salesforce is becoming more and more uh, an ecosystem than just a simple platform, right? Now it's more it's from Tableau to at one end to the just reporting at Tableau to the other end of MuleSoft. So I think the citizen developer, the business user now seeing the value of what it means to be in that ecosystem, including app exchange. So I've seen places where they can quickly come and tell you. And the good and bad part about it now with so much of information out there, the business users are also savvy about whether I know this year we don't have Dreamforce, but every time they go to Dreamforce, we see so much of information. People keep coming back and say, why can't I do this? Or why can't I do that? And it's a fair question, right? If the whole idea of having a platform that is if I need a business need, like things out there, I need a quick turnaround. I can't wait, right? Because so I think in that sense, the COE can help the business users achieve those goals, whether it's through the delivery or they're doing the delivery themselves. That doesn't really matter. But from business users' perspective, getting the value and solving the problem becomes paramount. And I think COE can really help there.
Great. Thank you, Pavan. That's a good insight. So should we move on to the next topic to talk
Yeah, so
about?
really, I think what I was thinking about, right? You've been doing this for like what I've seen a lot is that while this is like, I don't think anyone can debate that not having theory, right? Like, and everyone wants to have this theory or at least have some sense of this. But what I've seen in most organization is while the intent is there, It's a big challenge and a lot of hurdles of creating something like this, right? Whether it's organizationally or budget or just capability in some sense. Uh, there are pretty lot of challenges in this, right? So
Mm.
given that you've done this successfully multiple times and you're doing this at across Blue Sheet as well, would love to hear from you. What do you think? You know, are the big challenge and roadblocks to be able to achieve this, right? In terms of both creating the CV or doing this well. Would love to hear from your experience and how do you tackle them? Right?
Good question. I think when I talk about challenges, sometimes I don't even get to sleep because the challenges, especially building SCOE. Let's talk about that. It's my favorite topic. I think the challenges are the one which motivate me to, um, you know, drive and get things moving. So I look at the challenges into two sections. One is implementation. The next one would be operational. When it comes to implementation, right? Somebody comes to you and say, you know what, I want to implement sales COE. Let's say you have a Salesforce and you want to implement COE. How do you go about finding the right model? You really need to understand your IT organization, your business organization, the industry that you are in, which is basically if you have a highly regulated, those things you need to understand how today's world, today's current state, how is your organization structured? Without that, it will be very difficult to finding the right model. Wherever I worked, in my experience, understanding the IT delivery model, the business organization structure will help me to find the right model. So that is the number one thing that you should be looking at. The second challenge that generally we all face is, at least I faced, leadership engagement. If you are hired to do as a CO, to set up a COE, whether you are a consulting company or you are hired to do for the company as an employee, you need to make sure that you have the right leadership engagement. And then you can find the model, you can find the right leadership engagement. What if you don't have the right change management? Because you are telling people what the way it is supposed to be done. And that's where the change management, what I have followed, it is not about me. It is about a common cause, that why the COE is put up, why the COE is there. As long as you have the vision and the why statement, why COE exists, the change management is a lot easier. If you go and say, I am asked to do this work and I'm going to be the one doing this, versus why should we do this? If we don't do it, what is going to happen to the company and for your role? So I think the change management is very critical. And then when you put the change management, you will be, there are two types, right? One, when it comes to implementing a COE, it could be centralized where COE handles end-to-end delivery, pre-delivery, post-delivery. They are the one-stop shop for an end-to-end solution for Salesforce. Or it could be in a matrix model where COE has a very handful of responsibilities, but everything else is done by the matrix model. So you need to have the RACI model and then organization alignment. Okay, when I say organization alignment, this is not just the IT alone. If you're sitting in the IT as a COE, you need to make sure that you have the right executives are aligned with your approach. Because as a COE, you need to make some decisions. That's where organization alignment, whether it is an IT or whether it's a business, they need to be aligned. They need to support you. And finally, not the least one, these are the examples that I could think of, the KPIs. End of the day, COE still considered in many organizations as a cost center. If you are considered as a cost center, if you don't show the value, No matter what you do, whatever you say, it doesn't make any sense. You got to know what your KPIs are. So these are the our implementation challenges. But let's say you implement it, it's going well, you get a good reception and good feedback from your colleagues and your stakeholders. Now you need to make sure that you are operationally successful. This is always ongoing effort. This is changing on a regular basis. Collaboration and communication. Just because you implemented Salesforce COE or any CRM COE, if you don't have a good collaboration and communication process, anything that you did will fade away within a short period of time. And then operational challenges. Suddenly, if company says that, okay, we are going to buy some organization, I mean, if they're going to do an M&A activity, and you need to be ready because it's a CRM. You are dealing with customer relationship. And find not the, if you look at the processes and tools, I personally, I prefer Salesforce to solve Salesforce problem. I'm fortunate wherever I worked, I use Salesforce to manage my processes. And you can do all these things. Staffing is not the least. That is the most important thing. You need to educate people. Any organization you go, Salesforce ecosystem is fairly big. You need to ensure that um, um, staffing and resources are properly trained in Salesforce. These are the challenges that I see. Maybe Pavan, I can ask you. I can talk about this challenge for forever. So I want to ask you if I think I asked this question, but I'm going to ask this question again. If it doesn't exist, specifically, what do you see be the challenges in the implementation and operational
Sure.
if the Salesforce doesn't exist or COE doesn't exist?
So I think that's a great point, value, right? So when at least on the implementation side, when a CV doesn't exist, it's like a wild west there, right? You
Hmm.
start everything from resourcing to stuff. Like when we go in and if it's brand new, it's still easy. But like starting from, hey, how many orgs are then right in the enterprise? For this use case, should we use org A or org B or org C? We don't know. If for this use case, is there a custom object which is already created, or if I create an out of the box, I use an out of the box object, will that interfere with something else? I don't know, right? What is our integration strategy? What is our uh, backup and recovery strategy? Like these fundamental questions which keep coming up, and unless there is a central authority to at least understand that these are challenges, because yes, we can do one way or the other, but sometimes as an SI, you're looking at a project and not like an entire enterprise-wide program, right? So while we keep those views in mind, but without a say, it gets very tricky, and that's why always most of the organizations we work with, we recommended that hey, at least set up something like this, right? Whether it might be formal or informal, get together in once a month or get together a couple of months, and I think that's in later slides we'll talk about how that models work, but that's been very important to have this getting people together because this is a it's an enterprise platform and things are evolving. And if you don't do the right thing, you'll pay the technical debt which you'll inherit will be pretty significant.
Well, I think the I forgot to mention, but you brought a real good point, the technical debt. Um, I've seen organizations when you don't have a COE, the technical debt. Some places I've seen the API version. We all know what API version in Salesforce, right? You have a when you log into Salesforce and you would see the API. Some of them are 3 years old, and Salesforce is saying you are almost in the dying stage. You got to fix your API. And when you do a health check and when you do this thing's so apparent. One of the things that one of my clients that I was working on in the East Coast, I said technical debt in Salesforce is undervalued, and it is the one of the things that the CIO that I spoke to. The most important thing for me is that Salesforce, you should not have technical debt. And I said, what do you mean by technical debt within the sales? How do you know what do you know? So he gave me some good examples of how the technical debt adds a lot of pressure for the Salesforce team to manage the operations. So you brought in a good point, Pawan. Anything else, Pawan, on this one?
No, I think from a challenge, and this I think tees up very well to the next couple of discussions right away, which is based on these things, how we look at a COE model becomes very critical, right? Because that keeps evolving, and these challenges lead to various operational models of COE. We would love to hear your thought on that, and we can do that discussion.
Perfect. So let's talk about the operating models, right, Pawan? That's probably the next logical step for us.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. So I would like to understand your perspective on the operating model. You, as a SI partner, you've been working in the field for a long time. Help us to understand what are the models, how does it work, and help us to give us some insight.
So, as I was saying, I really feel the sales of COE is an evolving situation, right? Like right from whether your organization maturity to your Salesforce platform maturity, right? It keeps changing, and whether in one quadrant or the other. But the way I've typically we've looked at it is in two axes. One is how much of governance oversight is Salesforce CAV doing, and how much is the Salesforce CAV involved in the actual development effort, right? When I say development effort, I mean actually sitting and writing code. Right. So those are the two main parameters I feel are two axes where you can go either way, and there's no right or wrong answer as a like where exactly which model should fit in. It's mostly based on, as I said, maturity of the organization, structure of the organization, and where in the journey you are, right? And you can move from one to the other. And what I've seen is like, it's put into four quadrants, and there are various elements which are required by the CEO, right? Like whether are you really helping in the staffing, are you really helping in the training, or are you helping in license management? Are you doing health check for the orgs, or are in terms of are you defining the roadmap, or are you defining what app exchange products to be used, right? So based on those various like all these functionalities, we've kind of took a stab and say, okay, either you're in the enablement phase or you're in the delivery excellence phase or you're trying to innovate or you're trying to be a guardian. Right? And these all vary. And of course, each one comes with its own challenges and you can kind of mix and match and be at one situation. But relatively what we felt is based on these two axes, is are at some point in one of these quadrants and are able to evolve into one model or the other. So those are things we've seen, Velu. Would love to hear from you, given that this is more an outside-in view, right? But you being inside, you've been doing this for quite some time. Would love to hear from your perspective how you see this evolve and where do you guys fit in this film?
It's a it's a very easy. I think the complexity you have explained it very simplified manner on one slide. I think you did a great job of explaining some kind of a paradigm or a model or an understanding how how this all can be put together in a way where people can understand. So, in my experience, having implemented COE, this is an evolving process. There is no one, as you said, there is no one straight line. Um, it this is where when you choose whether you want to go governance oversight or you want to do an implementation involvement, right? When you do implementation involvement, this is where you are taking end to end. You are responsible for delivery. COE is responsible for delivery. But in a matrix organization, where delivery might be from a different organization, where the COE is the enabler, but not only the enabler, they can also be the governance oversight. So they can take certain responsibilities and own it, whereas the rest of the teams can do multiple uh, facets of the projects. Yeah, development team can do the delivery part of the work. There is a delivery team ultimately responsible for delivery, and there is a QA team, and there is
Yeah.
a security team. So there is multiple ways to do. So what I have seen, Pavan, in my experience, I call it hybrid. There is they, I might pick a couple of items here on the left, lower left, couple from the top, couple from the top right, couple from the bottom right. So that I can pick what I want to pick and make sure that remember the first step of why CRM, COE, the IT and the business alignment, and then ensure to choose when you want to choose the right model. I think this will give you a great insight on what is that you want to do as a CRM COE lead, or if you're asked to do. Pick whatever you need to pick, or you go with one track if you want to go with enablement. So my experience, predominantly hybrid, not one model. That's what I have done so far.
Yeah, and Velu, just and I'm sure a lot of things get evolved here, right? Like based on what organization you are, in terms of what, whether as you said, with the matrix organization uh, or hierarchy organization. But have you also seen a difference between whether it doesn't really matter what platform, I mean, in the sense, what components of the platform you're choosing, whether have you seen a difference, whether it's only a very marketing cloud specific engagements or it's purely service cloud engagements? How, as the clouds are evolving, as the enterprise are moving on to different clouds, do you see any challenges, or do you see that being um, impacting any of these models?
I think so, especially this year. Actually, you brought up a good point. I've been thinking, but I have never paid too much attention to it. This year, if you noticed it, Salesforce bought Velocity, and then they said they're going to be in Salesforce Industries. So when I always go back my consulting days and where I worked in different clouds. When Salesforce came along, Sales Cloud was the predominant, then the Service Cloud, then the Marketing Cloud, then so many clouds, and we all got cloudy. When now, 2020, it is Salesforce industry or industries. So will this, the COE, how are they adapting and changing? Because, I think in the future, this is my prediction, and this is where I think the COE should pivot. Not if you look at COE, we have talked too much about technology, processes, and the tools, and the delivery, and the process delivery. One thing that we did not talk too much about it today is the industry knowledge. Should COE bring that industry knowledge? That is what I am telling my team, that we should focus on the industry knowledge, because Salesforce is going in the industry knowledge direction. If you look at Salesforce ecosystem, they have 13 clouds today: manufacturing cloud, whatever the cloud, health cloud, and so many things, right? I can't say everything, but in the health cloud, now in the payer specific, I'm in the health insurance industry, payer specific, we have health cloud. So if the COE is going to be helping to enable the organization to deliver fast, innovate fast, and be competitive and so on, I think the COE should start looking at the business knowledge, the industry knowledge. It's no longer the technology is what your internal competitive advantage. I think the industry knowledge. So I am actually discussing with my team, how do we learn that industry knowledge where you don't go reinvent the wheel, you start aligning your solution along with the industry solution, which is recommended by Salesforce.
No, it completely makes sense, Velu, and I think that's going to that. The reason I brought that up was I think I'm seeing that challenge nowadays, especially with the breadth of what Salesforce is acquiring and quickly innovating, that's kind of sometimes very tricky for even a CEO to keep up, even if you have all the bells and whistles, for one organization like unit to be able to have knowledge of the entire ecosystem is getting a little tricky, right? I mean, in terms of the number of people you need to hire, you just keeping up abreast with all the happenings in the ecosystem is a task by itself. I'm sure you guys are facing that same problem, but we're seeing that being a big challenge with the CEOs.
Totally. I am glad you brought that up point. I think I'm going to keep that in my mind when I talk to my team and say, let's focus on the industry. I think we are there, but we are not there 100% yet. I think it's going to be an evolving. So as you see, you don't have to worry about sales cloud or service cloud. It's all about what is the outcome that you are helping for your members to achieve, your customers, your group insurance customers, and if you're provider management, you are specifically focused on the end customer or the end business customer to provide the value that you want to provide. It's a great point. Thank you, Pavan. I think we should start looking at the next topic.
Yeah, so I think it flows in well, right, Velu? Given that you're seeing the models, I think one of the key challenges, and I think you would agree to it, like what is this, how do you measure the success for a COE? Like, how do I, what do I, because it's completely, you're not delivering in terms, unless you have a complete central organization where you're more a delivery. But if you're playing an overarching role, how do I make sure I'm important? How do I showcase to the team? Or how do I measure internally, right? Because sometimes that's a big challenge I've seen, that you're only governing that what is the value the CEO is bringing, right? I think it's very difficult to quantify it and important to measure. So would want to see from you how you've been doing it, what's your take on it, and
It's a
how do you measure it?
it's a good point. I think we all know we are in the pandemic period where everything is measured based on what's the outcome versus what's the output. It doesn't matter which team you are, which company you work for. At the end of the day, what are your outcomes? How do you measure your own success? So I look at the Salesforce COE KPIs into four categories. Whether you are a metrics organization or you are managing end to end everything you are responsible for. So delivery is one of the things that I would always make that as a high priority. When I say delivery high priority, that's when you will see the direct output or outcome. And you see all these metrics, right? The deployment frequency, mean lead time for changes, mean time to recover, and change failure rate. So this is a delivery. Whether you are responsible or the delivery team responsible, you are directly influencing them or you are enabling them. But yes, you may be able to do delivery well, but what if you are not managing your governance right? People are stealing your data, your health is failing, and but you're still delivering. That means you're going to hit the concrete wall pretty soon. So they make sure your governance controls are in place. This is where, in my experience and my opinion, the COE should own the governance, regardless of whether you sit in the business or you sit in the technology. The third component is an operational, right? You are looking at the delivery, you're looking at the governance, but if you're not managing your cost, your user management, your release management, and environment management, people can go and have their own field day, right? So they can create as many users as they want. They may not use it. They will provision it, but they may not activate. They may have hundreds of users, but some of the users may not even be ever logging in, and they will still have a license. So these things have to be managed. And finally, no matter what, all this, the top three are important, but ultimately, if the business does not see the business value with Salesforce CRM or any CRM, it's no good. So that's where the COE can help develop the KPIs and help measure the KPIs, regardless of they're accountable or responsible, or somebody is responsible but the COE should have a good bird's eye view of everything. They will be certain areas they will be responsible, certain areas they will be accountable, certain areas they will be just helping the other teams more like a consultative. So that is how I would look at the KPIs. I think if we do this and if we can show this to the leadership, I I believe the success is I would say pretty much guaranteed, but there is no guarantee for guarantee.
So really, what you're saying is pretty much in the sense, if I look at uh, the theme here, is that the success of the KPI is the success of the platform, right? Success of Salesforce itself, right? Like whether it's from delivery, governance, operational, like show the COE is responsible to make sure that the true potential of the platform is being leveraged, and if that's not happening, it's a complete. I mean, it's a failure of either of these. It's not the technology failure; it's the process of tools. So that's the value, and that's how you can justify saying that hey, either we are getting the true potential of the platform, or we're not. And if we're not, let's look how we can improve that. And whether it's in a matrix model or a centralized model, we can on these 3 or 4 dimensions, we can actually measure them, articulate that this is was it before release after or here release after release, here's what the NPS score is improved or the value is improved. And that's how you can justify the quote unquote the cost of SEO.
Absolutely. And the cost of the Salesforce or any CRM investment, it's not only the COE, it's just the investment. These are the things that you measure for your Salesforce investments or any CRM investment.
So a part of that's value, I know that this is like the Salesforce ecosystem has a bunch of players, right? Like from the whenever you do the CRM, there's especially in our world we have there's App Exchange guys, the IT folks, the compliance people. There's just licensing. There's just bunch of things which are very very important, right? That most of the big enterprises now have SI partners like us who want to be there. There are multiple people, so I think there's a big relationship angle as you point out, like how you are more the central hub to connect all these people and be responsible. So we want to hear from you, like how are you doing it at Blue Cross Blue Shield, as well as what is your take on the COE being the heart and soul to connecting all these people, being the facilitator to make sure everything is done right.
It's a really great question. There is no magic bullet. If you, as I said earlier, if it is a matrix organization, everybody wants to talk to everybody. If it is a centralized organization, if it's a command and control organization, where everything goes through one party. So, when you look at SI partners, there is I work with SI partners. I do have a relationship, but in the companies that I worked with, the SI partners have the regular partner management ecosystem within the company. So we are a subset within the COE. CRM vendor, whether it's a Salesforce or SAP or anyone, the COE, my recommendation, should own the relationship. So it becomes a lot easier for having a single point of contact for the vendor as well as for the company. For partner ecosystem, it's a big thing. This is where the businesses get involved. There is a different IT product managers or the application or the product managers get involved. It kind of gets messy. So this is where the COE can put some governance around it. And the stakeholders. So when it comes to some important communications about the platform, about the metrics, having a regular cadence with the stakeholders is very critical. And I call that an executive decision council where people, the execs work together as all the stakeholders from the executive level join together and start communicating and collaborating. Finally, IT teams. As I said, there are multiple teams. You should make sure you have the right collaboration and communication. There is no competing priorities. People are not doing duplicate work. As the ecosystem matures, you need to have centralized place where IT teams can collaborate and make use of the platform. So that is important. So the long story short, most of the relationship can be managed very well by COE, but it is not necessary that all relationship should be managed by COE.
No, makes sense. And I think really I've seen, especially on the licensing, right? I think that's been a key challenge I feel with the SaaS-based solution, especially on the CRM side. Like if you have business users or other developers on multiple login, they're spanning multiple users, it kind of gets into tricky relationships, and it's good. I know there are a lot of things Salesforce trying to change now to be able to enable this, but I think the COE having that oversight and managing the relationship both from a licensing perspective, at least give that point of view, right? Because sometimes procurement directly is not as aware of what's happening across the board than a CA would be. So I think that becomes very, very important for to be involved in those negotiations as well as giving them the oversight of what's happening everywhere from business perspective.
Absolutely.
So hello, I know we have 10 more minutes. I think there are a bunch of questions I see on the chat as well. And
Okay.
I know one thing I know we have a couple of minutes to cover to enable. So I think we all agree it's difficult, it's challenging. I mean, I know there are lots of things which the COE has to do. So I know there are a bunch of tools, processes, management activities which needs to be done with the COE. So do you want to throw some light? I know it's a big topic. I know I don't want to steal the thunder of your next session, but I want to cover a little bit about the tools and programs which are available
Yeah.
for a good COE implementation.
Yep. And it is COE, it's not a 1 hour conversation. So we are trying our best to share our experience and the knowledge. Anybody who's listening on online, or those who are going to be watching this video in the future. So the upcoming session that we want to focus on, what are the steps involved? What are the tools that will help you to succeed in setting up and executing your COE? So you have 7-step process that I put together, or Pawan and I put together. So we will talk about this. You see the how do you design it, how do you implement, how do you educate. So there will be a lot more details behind it. So please stay tuned. We will certainly communicate with you about our upcoming session. We will talk more further into it. Pawan, I think because of the time, we should cut short. We have 8 minutes. I would love to take some questions. I think we should respect the questions that we have.
So, Velu, I see one of the questions in terms of what's the good time to start thinking of creating a COE? When the org see flow of use cases to be onboarded. So, just want to understand. I have my point of view, but would love to hear from you. When do they start thinking?
I think the day you want to start thinking about bringing Salesforce, the COE should be established first before you bring any CRM. That's what I would say. If I were to recommend any organization, COEs should be the um, uh, uh, at least should be. It's like how we do the test management. If you're developing a software, bring the test managers up front. Same thing. If you're bringing in a CRM, make sure that your COE is part of that. You don't have to have a formal COE leader, but there should be a formal responsibility within 1 or 2 people. So there was a client that I worked in Michigan. They before they even thinking of bringing Salesforce into the organization, I was a consultant. They were talking to me. Okay, if I bring Salesforce, they had a Salesforce in another division. So the new division they wanted to bring Salesforce. The VP that I was working with, she was saying, "Well, I think before we bring Salesforce, we implement here in our division. I want to start thinking about COE." So that was a good eye opener for me. Having gone through this process, in my opinion, bring it as early as possible, possibly before you implement Salesforce.
I agree, Velu, and I think to be frank, what I've seen is that's the first thing you start. And as you currently point, it doesn't need to be a big organization, a big process to do that. Like I've seen things actually with one of the even decent sized customer, and some of it was because of the org structure. There are concepts like a virtual COE, right? In the sense of where they are, at least you should have something in process. As you had pointed out, you need to be articulate. These are the functionalities. These are things which needs to be done, like at the governance piece and the best practice piece. Whether it's housed as under one person or under leader is not as important, but at least identifying that that needs to be done is very critical. And whether you guys all meet once a week, once a month, or in a virtual setting in terms of a virtual COE where you distribute those responsibilities, that doesn't matter as much, but at least getting that, thinking about that from day one, I think is very, very critical.
Great.
So another question, really was about change management, right? And I think, um, how do you see change management happening here? Because I think that's one of the key things in terms of in the Salesforce world that adoption and those become very, very critical. What do you see the role of COE in that?
Um, I think it's an excellent question. I think I emphasized even during my presentation or when we talked about the change management. In the change management itself, often you communicate. I think the key success factor or a critical success factor for change management is the vision that you have, the purpose of having the COE. If it is so clearly articulated and defined, I think the change management will be easy. Oftentimes, we are the COE leaders. They think it is the right thing to do this. It's like a one-way street. Just go keep implementing it. So the one what I have noticed it with my experience, getting the buy-in during the implementation is a very, very critical. Buy-in from your colleagues, buy-in from your developers and your leadership, your the business stakeholders. I think that is the key. The change management. So the way we've done a lot of road shows, a lot of communication. We established our internal website. All those things help major way to get this thing going. So change management, and if you, I'm not a change management expert. Many companies have change management or in the teams within the company. So if you are struggling how to put the change management, put the communication together, go to the change management teams internally. They will help you how to formally put together a change management. In my experience, mostly I have done it. I have some experience in the change management. In the interest of the time and the budget, we didn't have a lot of exposure to using the internal change management organization.
No, and I think I agree, Velu. Change management is critical for success of any program, right? And it's not the tools which changes. I know with Salesforce also bring in some of the native functionality, and we've used tools like WalkMe to understand the measuring, what the footprint of it is, how people are using it. But I think that's very, very important, right? To measure, you can build, but once you build it, whether how people are using it and whether they are able to actually derive value becomes very important for you to measure. So there are a couple of tools we've seen, and I think that's a part of the thinking. And I think the COE can definitely play a role in terms of suggesting tools or making sure the program is thinking about change management very actively while they're doing development.
Absolutely.
I know we have 2 more minutes, Velu. There's one last question which I think which is very interesting, um, is about while as the number of clouds are growing, as the number of domains are growing, do you think there should be compartmentalization of the COE, or do you think should we have a COE for Sales Cloud and Health Cloud or the Domain Cloud? And it's an interesting concept, but would love to hear your thoughts. I have my thoughts, but would love to hear your thoughts on it.
I you know what? I think it's a great question. I do not have a straight answer. I would love to have your perspective on that. I haven't thought in that angle. Maybe it's the end of the day. Maybe I should slow down. My
Thank you for
intellect is
for
not
sure.
there. Maybe you can help us out with that.
Time for no, and this is a COE and it's a bigger SI problem for me to think about, right? Like how do we make sure that we keep expanding our breadth of knowledge and a breadth of things being excellent and everything, right? While we specialize in something. So from a CV perspective, I think I still feel maybe it might be too much to compartmentalize everyone, but you definitely need to have someone who is knowledgeable in one of those, right? Like in terms of in your, like for example, in the healthcare industry, yes, the CEO should know what health cloud is and whether they should move to health cloud or not to move to health cloud, right? Uh, that's a big question, or when to move to health cloud, when not to. So I think the CEO should definitely be responsible for that. On the other things in terms of what it means, for example, MuleSoft acquisition or Tableau acquisition, right? How does whether that should fit in into the entire Salesforce CRM piece or not? It's an interesting question, and I think my take there is we should be aware of it. If your organization provides you the ability that you can put all of them together, that's great. But your organization doesn't normally fit into what Salesforce does, right? Like for example, your data teams might be very different than your CRM or business tools, right? So, but the fact that they are under the same Salesforce umbrella, the CA should be aware of and should be collaborating with everyone else to be able to do that.
To agree with you. What I have learned, there was somebody was I was reading an article and somebody was I was discussing too. COE is a very overused term. Sometimes it's an abused term. Uh, so it's we call it center of excellence, but it has got a lot of we sometimes we set the wrong expectation. Sometimes people think that we can do anything and everything under the roof. I think having that clarity of what you can do with COE is the key. And now we can go on, Pavan. In the interest of time, we are 4:01 p.m. And I wanted to thank, if you don't have any questions, Pavan, we can close this.
I think yeah, I think even the chat we should be good with it.
Okay, very great. Thank you, Pavan. Appreciate your time. Thank you, everyone who joined us online today. We will see whether we can post this recording online. And those who missed it, they should be able to see this online. Once again, thank you for your time and enjoy your day. Be safe and talk to you next time. Thank you,
Thank
Pawan.
you.